So thank you all for joining us for the grad school prep series, Writing Your Personal Statement workshop. Joining us today is Dr. Emily Shreve, Associate Director of Academic Transitions. She is going to help us learn how to format a statement of purpose and provide us with tips about preparing, organizing, writing, and editing your personal statement. So I'm going to hand it over to her to get us started.
Hi, everyone. I almost just said good morning, everyone, and it's 4 p.m. So I think I saw Zanny suggest that they were stressing out, and I understand the feeling. I think this is how November is. But I'm so glad that you could take the time to join me today to hear a little bit more about writing your personal statement. So um, I will just tell you a little bit about myself. So you got my job title, but my PhD is in English literature. As I got my PhD, I taught writing courses, and I also worked in the writing center at my old institution. So not only did I have to create personal statements for my graduate school applications, but I also helped other people in that space. And this is one of the things I really love because I think personal statements are cool in the sense that in some ways they're very formulaic. There's kind of a basic structure or a limit to them, but they're also these places for unique creativity where you really get to work on showing yourself and who you are in a really cool and specific way. So I'm excited to talk with you about them today, and I just want to reiterate that if you have any questions at any point, you can let me know. Can everybody hear me? I got one message from someone saying that they're not hearing anything. So I just want to make sure that other people can hear and that it's okay. All right. Okay, good. Thank you so much, everybody. So for the person having technical issues, you might be able to reach out to Marlena directly. She might be able to help you a little bit, or maybe log back off, like log off and log on again. Okay. So the goals of this workshop that were sort of designed is to be able to distinguish between a statement of purpose and a personal statement. Kiara, that's a good tip. Thank you. Understand the components of an effective personal statement, receive some tips on how to prepare, organize, write, and edit, think a little bit about tone and how to personalize, and then do some workshopping. I'm not sure how much time we're going to have for the final one, but I will kind of go through as much as we can, and then we might have some time together to talk about things you're working on and get some specific feedback and advice. So just to warm up, I want to give you like 3 or 4 minutes on your own. I just want you to think about if you had to write a 6-word story, something that told your story in 6 words, what would your 6 words be? And you can write them on your own, just down on a piece of paper, or you can go ahead and share them in the chat if you would like to share your 6-word story. But you only get 6 words to tell your story. What are you going to say? It's very tough, Sarah. Yeah. I'm going to share mine in the chat. Take about 1 more minute to think about what your story would be. 6 words, shorter even than a tweet. So one of the reasons I wanted you to do that exercise is because what a personal statement is essentially a very, very brief and succinct summary of who you are and what your kind of journey of intellectual development is. Basically, like what has gotten you up to the point that you are applying to graduate school. On the one hand, it's very challenging. It's hard to talk about ourselves. It's hard to talk about ourselves in really succinct and concise ways. But if you can do it in 6 words, you can definitely do it in a page or 2 pages. So I'm hopeful that this 6-word exercise, and Caitlin, thanks for sharing yours. I'm hoping that your 6-word exercise kind of helped you focus in on, who am I? What is my story? What is my kind of like quick, brief, this is what I'm hoping for. And then 2, it'll make it much easier when you're actually writing out a fuller statement. So mine, for example, I applied, I was an English Lit PhD student, loved to read, obsessed with reading, read all the time, read voraciously. All I wanted to do was read things and talk about them with other people. And then, over the course of my graduate career, I began to realize that I loved teaching even more than I loved reading books and talking about them. That teaching was actually the vocation that I wanted, the career that I wanted. And while I loved being connected into the English department, I really wanted to have a job where I could focus on teaching and teaching alone rather than having to do additional research or additional projects. So that's my story. I love to read. I love teaching more. Okay, so again, a personal statement or a statement of purpose is a narrative of your intellectual development. And I think as you can kind of see, and this isn't just because I'm an English major, I'm really emphasizing this idea here that it's a story, it's a narrative. It's not just a listing of things you've accomplished or done. That is going to come from your transcript. That is going to come from a CV or resume that you might submit. So in this document, what you really want to do is try to paint a picture of who you are, to tell your story in such a way that anyone looking at it gets a sense of where you've been, where you are now, and where you want to go with your grad school journey. So one question, of course, is what is the difference between a personal statement and a statement of purpose? And to be honest, I myself was not entirely clear on this either. So I did look this up. This came from grprepscholar.com, which has a lot of great resources, but they had this really helpful chart to show what's distinct about these two different forms of writing that you might need to do depending on the school you're applying to. So a statement of purpose tends to be about your academic and professional background, some of your skills and accomplishments, and then sort of like where you're heading. So if you're going into a grad program, what's the kind of research you want to do? What are your career goals? Why is the program you're applying to a good fit for you? The personal statement is going to have a lot of those things, but as is implied by that addition of the personal, the idea is that you're telling and sharing a little bit more about yourself and who you are. So a little bit more of your personality, a little bit more of your story beyond your academic and professional life is likely going to come into that piece of writing. A statement of purpose can be more formal. A personal statement would be less formal. The length is typically going to be 1 to 3 double-spaced pages. It depends on what kind of program you're applying for, although I would say generally 2 is probably a good thing to shoot for, as that's easier for committees to quickly read and scan. What is tricky here is that a lot of different places will use the two terms interchangeably. So some are very clear, like they want a statement of purpose and they want it to be this more formal thing. Others are very clear, they want a personal statement and they really want to know about you, but some are kind of using them to say the same basic thing. We want to hear your story about what has brought you to apply to this school in this particular moment. Use rhetorical analysis skills that I'm sure you all have as college students at this point to kind of look at the website, look at the application materials, and see what kind of information they give you, because I think that will help you to see which version of this you should lean more toward. They're doing the same thing. One is just a bit more personal, one is a bit more formal, and you're going to be able to pick up on the context clues of your application to figure out which way you should go with your statement. Hanging in at this point, anybody have any questions or anything you want to throw out into the chat? If so, please do. I don't want to rush too fast. So I'll keep talking, and then hopefully if you have questions, you'll be throwing them in. I think it's important to think about like why personal statements or statements of purpose exist. What is the point of them? Like, what are they there for? So for the admissions committee, the committee of faculty who are looking at everyone who's applied for a grad program and trying to decide who they're going to accept, it's helpful because it's highlighting what you want to achieve in the program. And it clarifies what you're going to bring to the department or the community. When programs are accepting applicants, they're not just thinking about who has the highest test scores, who's the mathematically supposedly best candidate, and we'll just let those people in and simple, easy, done deal. They're asking for this because they're trying to build a community. I'm going to talk about English because that was the program I knew and knew well, but they were trying to create cohorts and they were trying to create a robust grad student community where you would have people who would study a lot of different things. Maybe one person is studying medieval literature, another person is studying African American literature of the 20th century. Other people are looking into the Victorian period and are particularly interested in, women's narratives of that time. They're trying to create this really diverse and engaging pool of students who are going to work together in that program. So they're thinking about the cohort they're building and how everyone is going to fit into that. They're also trying to make sure everyone is going to be supported in the program. So as they're bringing people in, they're trying to think through, do they have the faculty to work with? They're a program that doesn't have a medievalist is probably not going to bring someone in who wants to study medieval literature because they're going to be aware that that person isn't going to get what they need in that program. If you're really interested in emergency medicine and there's a medical school that maybe doesn't have as many resources there, that might be a terrible example. I feel like every medical school would probably have emergency medicine. I'd have to ask my brother. He's gone through it. This is what's dangerous when you give examples that are not your own. But you get the idea, right? They might say, we're not going to be able to meet the interests that you have. It would make more sense for you to go elsewhere. So this is what they're trying to get a sense of. And of course, with that, it's also demonstrating written communication skills. So just how strong is your written communication? Do they know that you're going to be able to keep up with a level of written work that they're expecting? So in sum, it's telling them why you want to be in graduate school or whatever professional program you're applying for, why you want to be at that particular institution and in that particular program, and why they should bring you into their community. You're making a pitch for yourself. This is what I'm going to bring to you. Bring me on. So that is what the personal statement is doing for them. It's filling out your story beyond just what's on a CV or transcript so that they can see how you're joining their community and how they can help you too. Questions about that? So it's not just beneficial for them. There's a benefit to you too. And I know it can be hard to think about when you're in the midst of writing it and you're feeling the pressure. But writing statements like this, I think, are really helpful because they're very useful reflective tools. So it's allowing you to think through, why am I really doing what I'm doing and what do I want to get out of it? So it clarifies your purpose. Why am I going to grad school? What do I want to get from this grad school experience? It can help you highlight the benefit of a particular program. I've definitely had experiences where I've been interested in applying to something and then realized as I tried to write, a cover letter or, statement of purpose, because you sometimes have to do this for grants and other things like that too. I might realize that I just don't actually have very good reasons. Like I might have been doing it just because it felt like I should or something like that. So it's helped me make sure that the thing I'm putting time and effort into is something I really do want to put that time and effort into. And it helps you set your goals. So when you start your program, you're going to want to have some clear senses of what do I want to gain from this graduate school experience? What do I want to get out of this? And so this letter, this initial writing that you're doing is going to help you think through, this is why I'm here. These are the goals. This is what I want to get from my experience. It also is providing you with practice for future professional writing. I mentioned cover letters, fellowship applications, grant applications, letters of reference and recommendation. All of those types of writing tend to have a really similar format where very succinctly you're trying to talk about why one thing connects with another thing and making the argument for it. So it's really good. Like this type of writing doesn't go away, and it's really good to keep working on it and building your skills with it. So thinking about what do you need to include, you are telling your audience, where are you now? So some basic information about yourself and your intellectual development, how you got there, as well as how you hope to continue to grow in graduate school, what you're hoping that experience will get for you. So you can kind of think about this as a classic like past, present, and future narrative. The only thing I would say with that is just because you're covering past, present, and future does not mean you dive right into your past. So you don't want to open your personal statement saying, to the selection community, I was born long ago on a farm in Kansas, right? Like that is not going to work. That's going too far back and it's diving into the past before you've even set up your point. So you want to think about this as a classic, like 5-paragraph essay that you might have learned when you were studying for some of those early standardized tests or writing college application letters. So that first paragraph is your present. It's your setup. This is who I am. I'm applying to your program, and here is why I am a good fit for it and I want to be there. So thesis statement, everything is in that first paragraph. Then you'll have a number of paragraphs, 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, depending on how much you need to say, supporting that argument. And in those paragraphs, you're really going to be focusing on what has brought you to this moment and what your future goals are. And then you're going to have a conclusion that wraps it up with whatever final note you want them to be thinking about in terms of you and your goals. Any questions about that? I'm afraid I'm going too fast. Reassurances are good. Thank you, Sarah. Video okay? All right. So recap, personal statement. It's your intellectual journey. It's your pitch for why you should be in that program, why they should bring you into your community by focusing on everything that's brought you to this moment and what you hope to do with this experience. So the next question is, how? How are you going to do this? What is going to be the process? So my suggestion are these 5 steps. You will notice there is a lot of revision, and I think that is just because it takes time to get this stuff to where you want it to be. It takes time to get your thinking on the page in the first place. It takes time to revise it in the way that, to really make it say succinctly what you want it to say. And so I really just want to encourage you to give yourself the opportunity to do this revision. I was a procrastinating writer. Even though I loved reading, I did not love writing. And so for almost all of my essays in college, I waited until the very last minute. But not this essay, right? When I was applying to grad school, I took a lot of time on it, and I'm really glad I did. I learned a lot about it, and it helped me get into the types of programs I wanted to get into. So I'd really encourage you to make sure you're giving yourself time to do this type of writing and revisioning work. So I'm going to talk through all 5 of these with some specific tips to help you kind of understand what I mean when I'm talking about these different focuses that you might be putting your energies toward in each revision. I'm separating them out because if you're trying to revise with all of those things in mind, all at the same time, chances are you're just going to lose focus. You're going to have a hard time making decisions. And so I think taking them step by step can be really useful. So first step is just to write. Again, you're thinking like 1 to 2 pages, just getting words on the page. Anne Lamott in her book Bird by Bird has a lot of really, really great writing advice. And one of the big things that she really emphasizes is that you need to dig into messy first drafts. You should not try to write with that kind of like, this is what it's going to be and it's going to be perfected. Perfection right at the very first start. That is going to cause you so much pressure. That's what leads to writer's block. That's what leads to procrastinating and makes the blank page so extreme. So the first thing is just to get messy, unfinished words on the page of things that you want to say about yourself and why you're applying to grad school. And this is advice for any writing you're doing too, any papers you're doing, this is helpful. One of the things she suggests is when you don't know what to write, just put blah, blah, blah. Like just say like, and I'm going to talk about my reasons for this school and I don't know what they are, so they're going to be good reasons, and just like put it out like that. You can fill in those blanks, you can fill in that blah, blah, blah moment later, but at least it keeps your momentum going and you can start to write into the things that you feel more confident about and then go back and fill in your structure. And Sarah, I agree. I have the same thing. I'm trying to be so perfect. Like every sentence you start to overthink it. Every sentence you're like not sure about what word. And it just is a very slow process and hard to get started. So Annie Lamott talks about this Bird by Bird. It's a great book. I'm happy to share some essays, like the essay of it with you if you wanted. You can email me. But this transformed my writing style. It was really useful. The other thing that helped me get this type of writing done was using the Pomodoro technique. I have zero motivation to start writing like ever. And one of the reasons why I don't is because I know it's a time intensive process. I know to write a good letter of recommendation, to write a good cover letter, to write whatever it is, a report I'm trying to write for work. It's going to take time and energy, and it's hard to gear yourself up for like, yay, I can't wait to work on this for 8 hours. Like nobody feels that way. Well, maybe some people do actually. My best friend does, but most people do not. So what I tend to do is using the Pomodoro technique. I think I am only going to work on this for 25 minutes. I set my timer, I pull up that blank page, I take Annie Lamott's advice and I write in messy ways, and I get that on the page for 25 minutes, and that's all I have to do that day. If I'm inspired, I can keep going, and that's often what happens. Once I get started, I'm okay with continuing to go. But if it's been 25 minutes and I've just eked out a couple sentences, I can at least say like, hey, I've got more sentences on the page than I did before. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to do something else, and I'll come back to this later. So this has really helped me with writing a lot. I wouldn't have been able to finish my dissertation if I didn't use the Pomodoro technique. Fair warning though, of those 25 minutes that you're setting the timer for, the first like 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes can be excruciating. I'm like pulling up Instagram. I'm thinking all of a sudden I'm hungry, even if I just ate. I'm thinking I need coffee. My mind, I'm like, I've got to clean and organize my entire house and closet. Like it's very easy to think about all these things you could be doing other than the writing. But if you sit with it and you keep yourself focused and keep coming back to that document for the space of that timer, again, most of the time, I think momentum kicks in and you can get some good stuff done. Additionally, writing in chunks, just saying, I'm going to take this one paragraph. I'm just going to write my intro paragraph today. Or, again, like the Pomodoro technique, I'm just going to write for a certain amount of time. That's much easier to motivate yourself to do. And it just makes it a less daunting task. If you can't tell, I'm a talker. So I have often found it useful to talk through my ideas first as well. I did that for this presentation today. I was with a colleague and I was talking through some of the things that I was doing. And so that really helped me to clarify what I wanted to say more than when I was just working on a PowerPoint or working on an outline. So if you're a talker, find someone who will listen to you and share them. So I hope this is useful, both for personal statements and in general. Sylvester, you're not alone. Writing is just a struggle. And again, if you can't tell, I'm a bit of an Anne Lamott fangirl, but she just points out like that myth of the writer who just sits down and writes so easily and wonderfully isn't true. Professional writers, people who write for a living know that, writing is just hard. It's hard to take everything that's in here, often beyond a verbal level, and put it into words that someone else can understand. So don't give yourself a hard time if you feel that struggle. So once you have words on the page, as messy as they are, you're going to need to start the revision process. My suggestion first is to start with just like, are you representing yourself? So that personal focus, is this showing me and who I am in a way that would be clear to someone else? So first of all, think through like, do you have a clear thesis statement? Do you have a couple of sentences that really clearly say, this is who I am, this is why I'm going to grad school, and this is why I'm a good fit for your department? This is essentially what an elevator pitch is. I don't know if any of you have practiced that or done anything with this with career services, but that same networking idea that you're going up to somebody, you're shaking their hand and you're saying, hey, my name is Emily Shreve. I'm Associate Director of Academic Transitions, which means I'm really passionate about supporting first-year students and their development into college students. So that was a very bad version of that, by the way, but that's that brief, succinct, here's who I am, here's what I do. So working on that clear thesis statement for your personal statement is going to help you have that clear introduction to yourself if you're ever at a conference, if you're meeting faculty here, if you're meeting faculty when you tour grad schools, whatever it is you're doing, it's just really useful to have that quick and clear introduction to yourself. It's your 6-word story, but just a little bit more than 6 words. Watch out for vague language and cliches. This is the challenge of any writing like this. It's very easy to say, hey, I'm enthusiastic, passionate, and really love anthropology. That's awesome, but there's also a lot of other people who are enthusiastic and passionate and really love anthropology. So you're going to want to think through how you can go beyond some of those cliches of enthusiasm and passion. I mean, still talk about your passion, but to add something more beyond that, something you yourself bring, that you have a unique personal story about how you came to anthropology. You have a unique research interest. You're actually addressing something that needs to be talked through more. Something that's sort of helping you stand out and really showing who you are specifically. So again, you want to avoid these resume-like lists of accomplishments. You want to avoid broad and general statements, and you want to watch out for vague terms. So you're trying to make yourself as specific as you can. So one way to do that is maybe you do have a broader thesis statement, but you get into real specifics about, this is a project I did during my undergraduate. This is what it was like. This is what I did. Here are the outcomes of this. The more specific you can get, the better. So maybe you talk about like you won a prize at a competition for it, or maybe there was particular feedback. Use numbers. If you surveyed 20 people, say you surveyed 20 people. Paint a vivid picture, not going off track, but paint a vivid picture of what you did in such a way that it's almost like your readers can imagine that they were there with you as you worked on that project, or as you had that internship, or as you discovered this particular research interest that you have. Same with when you're talking about your research. The more specific you can be with the questions that you want to explore, the better they're going to be able to get a sense about, what you can bring to that program and if they have the people to support you on that program. So don't be afraid to be specific with those things. I personally find it very hard to use language to describe myself. I think those are moments where imposter syndrome can really come in. Those are moments where you can start to feel anxious about, whether you're going to be, a good member of this program and whether this is right for you. And so I would really encourage you to get some of your ideas about how to describe yourself from the people who know you. Ask your classmates and peers that you work with. Ask the faculty who've been your mentors. Ask other people who've been your mentors. Ask people what they would say is something that unique that you bring to your classes, to your studies, to your research, and use that language and use their ideas and feedback to help paint a picture of yourself. I think it helps a lot when you feel anxious about those things to have someone tell you like, no, your research is really unique because no one's ever done this before, or no, you really have this quality that I think you are underselling here that you really should emphasize. Last but not least, think about the order of your paragraphs. Make sure you have a sense of why you're talking about the things you're talking about in the order you're talking about them. I think a lot of times we tend to start with just chronological, like I did this my sophomore year, my junior year I did this, and my senior year that. Sometimes I think that works really well and can be really clear, but sometimes that can lead to that kind of resume-like listing of I did this, I did this, I did that. To make your pitch, it might actually make sense to start with your senior project and then backtrack to how you got there. It just depends on what words you get on the page. So once you have it on the page, look at it and think carefully about what would be the best order for this. So for disciplinary focus, this is just a reminder that every discipline is different. Again, I'm hugely influenced in this because I was an English major and student, but it's going to be different for everyone. So as you're working on this, whether that's 2 years from now or this year or sometime in the future, think through what are the disciplinary conventions? What do you know about how people write in your discipline? What are the standards of writing? If you are applying for a science program, you're probably not going to be hugely poetic in your language, maybe a little bit, but it could give the wrong impression about whether you're going to be able to live up to the whether you're going to be able to meet those standards of short, sweet, succinct descriptions of experiments and results and so on. So really get a sense of that. Think through what professional language and knowledge you might want to demonstrate to show that you've really thought about this field and know you want to go into it. And make sure you have some sense of the current issues in the field. That's going to help you make a better pitch for why you should join that program. So, you want to show that you're somebody who understands what some of the contemporary questions are that sociologists are looking for, or historians are looking for, or, what a business program is doing for people who are in business, and what's going on in that field. So know your field, know your discipline, and kind of do a read through just looking to see if you've kind of met those standards. Again, faculty, peer really help you with this, because they're the ones that are going to help you say, like, this is a great point, but you're presenting this in a way that doesn't quite match how the field is talking about it. So here's some tips to kind of get you where you need to be. Last level of revision. So you've done yourself, you're making sure like you are coming across. Then you're doing that level of like disciplinary, like, is it you that's also matching the conventions of the discipline? The last level is to match the dynamic of the institutions you're applying for. So one, you just have to do that basic like research work, which you have to do when you're applying for jobs too, of are you meeting the expectations of the different programs? Some programs are going to ask for a personal statement that's 2 pages. Another program might ask for a statement of purpose that's 1. You want to make sure you have all of that clear. My advice is to use a spreadsheet. You could use the Google spreadsheet, all of the places you're applying to, what they're looking for in these documents, any specific prompts they have, any specific, page limits they have, the due dates, and whether you've done it or not. So a spreadsheet can be really useful for you here in keeping track of all of that. Again, think about what's uniquely exciting to you about the program or the institution. So there's going to be kind of like a basic middle chunk of what you write that's probably going to be consistent across all the different programs you're applying to. But you might want to emphasize in the final paragraph or the first paragraph some different components that are unique to that school. So I was interested when I applied to grad school in studying a writer who was a British Catholic writer in the modernist period. And there was one school I applied to that had an archive of British Catholic writers. And so I was able to say, like, hey, I would love to come to this institution because I would like to work in this specific archive you have. So you're going to want to look through and get some of that information about the specific program and interweave that within what you're writing. Also, you just have to make sure that each document has, I am applying to the Boston University's program or whatever it is. You don't want to be too general. Show that it's for them, even if you're just really changing the framing and the basis. The middles are the same. That makes sense? I do get worried when I present at 4 o'clock that my words are getting messy. Okay. And another way I talked about like archives or things like that. Thank you, Sarah. But also faculty that you want to work with. Some of them will ask you explicitly to do this. But if they don't, it's a great idea to say, I've read so-and-so's book. I was really impressed with their work. I would love to, get a chance to work with them. You can also oftentimes look at past classes that have been offered by the grad program and say, I've seen that you've offered multiple classes on, such and such a topic, and I would really love to explore that further, as I feel like that was an area that I didn't get to study as much in as an undergrad, and I'm really looking to get more information in as I move forward in my professional career. So looking at specific classes and things helps. They want to know you've done your research. They want to know that you want to come there because you want to be there, not that you're just kind of copying and pasting and applying everywhere. So really show that specific institutional knowledge and interest. And then of course, so these are all about thinking through how you're seeing things, what your vision is, and making sure that you've got yourself represented, the discipline represented, and the institution represented. And then of course, you just want to do that basic editing. Look for easily fixable errors, make sure everything is spelled right. I can tell you, even on job searches that I'm on, there are occasions you read a cover letter from someone and they forgot to change where they were applying to. So they're saying like, hi, I'm writing for the advisor position at, CSN. And we're like, well, we're not CSN. So this is very awkward and has already kind of started off on the wrong impression. So make sure you got all of that correct. All your T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Use the writing center for this. Have multiple people read it. One of the best ways to edit and proofread is to actually print it out. When you're looking at the computer screen, it's easy to kind of miss certain details and things. So I know, yikes is right. Yikes is right. So looking at the computer screen can cause your eyes to kind of like skip over things that might need fixed. Printing it out can really help. Reading it out loud can help too, because in that process of reading it out loud, you might realize that you mistyped a word or something like that. So I find reading out loud really helpful when I'm revising my writing. And again, make sure all your files are labeled clearly and you're not accidentally uploading any wrong file when you're in the midst of the application process. Last thing I wanted to talk about, and I don't have any clear answers for you on this one, but is tone. So it's a personal statement or a statement of purpose that still has personal elements about you. And oftentimes there's a question of like, how much is too much to share? If you've gone through a particular challenge in your life that has, led to this moment, how much do you disclose that? No hard and fast rules for this, but these are some things that I would suggest. First is disciplinary standards. Ask your faculty for advice. They know, a lot of them are on admission committees themselves. They're going to be able to give you some real guidance on what to share and how much to share. They might even, in their network, know people at the schools you're applying to. So they might be able to give you a clearer sense of, yes, this school really looks for this, or this program really looks for this. And, this one, I'm not sure about it. You might want to kind of pull back a little bit in how you're talking through things. Again, the institutional culture, you'll see that in some of the prompts that they ask you to write about. So some of the language they use to describe the application might help you get a sense of what they're looking for and how much they want you to share. You could also read the bios of the other graduate students at that school. What they're sharing in their bios on the grad program's website can give you a really good sense of, what the culture is there, about how people are talking about their life experiences and challenges. Also think through, what you're talking about, what's the importance to your research and your purpose in applying for grad school. If you are going to medical school because you had an experience as a child with, childhood cancer and you want to talk about that, you need to talk about that. That's your purpose. That's why you're there. So you're definitely going to want to share some of those really personal things if they're related to your reasons for doing that research or going into that grad program. And so that is the last one. It's just also the importance to you. I think sometimes we get advised not to be vulnerable or not to share things about ourselves because there's a sense that you might be judged or that people might have preconceptions about you. But you also have to think like, you were choosing these grad programs. You don't want to go to a grad program where you don't feel like you can be fully and holistically yourself. So if that part of your story is so important to you that you really feel like you can't show who you are without sharing it, then share it. And if that school isn't able to take you in that way, then that's not where you should be. You don't want to hide something of yourself and then get to a school where you have to continue hiding those things. That's not a recipe for sustainability or for thriving or for doing your best work as a grad student. One thing you also might want to think about is, do you have some distance from the issue? Sometimes if it's something you're currently experiencing, it can be hard to talk about well because you're just still in the midst of that. So you might want to think through that. And then also you might want to think through, is there a result? Is there a lesson, a takeaway, a growth in skills or something like that that is connected to what you might want to share that's very personal? Because oftentimes in that case, it makes clear why you're talking about it, and it helps your readers, those committees, to see that as a strength, to see that as a unique skill set you're bringing to the table, a unique experience you're bringing to the table, rather than as a cause for concern. But this is a really challenging and controversial topic. And so I do think, again, the best scenario is to talk to your specific advisors and mentors and to think carefully about which programs you're applying to. So last thought, kind of with that same message, a compelling personal statement is a statement that reflects you. It reflects your skills, your interests, your disciplinary focus. It reflects what makes you unique. It reflects what you're going to bring to any community that you are a part of. And so that's what you want to focus on. And you want to get great supportive people around you who can reflect you back at your best and help you write that as strongly and vividly as possible. So you are awesome. I know each of you are going to have something to contribute to every school that you might be interested in. It's just a matter of finding the words to describe it. Grad school is a learning experience. You're not a master yet, and you're not going to have to show you're a master when you apply. So don't put too much sort of pressure on yourself to have this perfect statement. You're going to keep learning. You can show that. Find the fun in it, enjoy the process of it, and please feel free to reach out. I love reading personal statements and cover letters and all the rest of it. I'm happy to read one, happy to give feedback. Again, I have a particular disciplinary background, but I definitely at least can look for commas, and I'm always happy to do some of that kind of editing and proofreading too. So I left us 1 minute for questions. So there's Marlena just shared a survey. Feedback is really great. It will help me if I'm ever doing a workshop like this again to make sure I'm meeting your needs. And it will help the program to make sure they're meeting your needs. And I'm not in a rush, so I'm happy to stick around if you have questions you want to ask for a few minutes before we wrap up.
And
Thanks,
thank you to our
everybody.
speaker for being here and sharing her expertise with us today.
I'm going to put my email in the chat in case anybody needs it. Thanks, Caitlin. And Kyla. Thanks, Sarah. Krista, I think the entire thing is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to see the PowerPoint slides with that recording and should be able to look at it. But if for some reason you're like not able to see them clearly, you can send me an email and I'll be happy to just send it directly to you. And thanks, Montserrat. I appreciate it. I hope it helps. Thanks, Sylvester.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Oh, you're welcome. I was muted. Okay, I'm gonna head out. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Marlena.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too.